So let us try to understand now, how did it all start? How did Naxalism as a word was coined and from where it evolved? Naxalism as a word, if you go, the roots goes back to 1967 uprising of peasants in Naxalbari, West Bengal's feudal society. Now, basically you must understand here, peasants here were largely working in the tea plantations. They were also having their own small farms, small sized farms, etc. So they were actually conducting out a protest there for demanding more rights, because most of these societies, even after 20 years of independence, were still under the landlords or the zamindars who were exploiting these peasants and especially targeting the women of these peasants. Understood? This was going on a regular basis. So the peasants took out a protest to protest against these atrocities that they were facing. The police got involved pretty soon, and instead of supporting the cause of the peasants or trying to understand why they are protesting, they started using excessive force. It led to push and pull. Finally, the skirmish became so huge that one policeman lost his life, which further irked the police force who were assembled there, and they used even more excessive force. But this additional amount of excessive force actually led to what? Further alienation. Now the peasants were like, enough is enough. They started protesting against the police even more violently, and this soon led to them forming guerrilla war groups. And as a matter of symbolification or as a matter of protest, nobody knows. But then pretty soon these small war groups that were formed among the peasants, they started taking out their anger or venting out their anger against their symbol of oppression, who was the zamindar. And how did they take it out? They actually started beheading the zamindars. That was the only thing. Our women, if you touch, this is what we are going to do with you. You are going to go ahead with the oppressive practices that you have imposed upon us. We are going to take out your head. This went on. So imagine from the side of the government now how difficult the situation is. Because we are talking about poor peasants here, but they are doing something grossly inhumane and grossly illegal. What action will you be able to take? On the other side, from the peasant side, yes, they are killing somebody who misbehaved with their women. They are killing somebody who has been oppressing them since the last 20 or 25 years. So they are taking it out. From the side of the zamindars, this is my land, this is my property. How can the peasants behave like this? How can the tribal people behave like this? That is their set of argument. Now, whose side should we stay on? Excessive force if the government takes, it will lead to more violence. If the government sits still, it will show that government is weak. A classic, do it, you are damned. You don't do it, you're still damned. Getting the idea? This started off. But what should have been only confined to the district of Naxalbari or the village of Naxalbari suddenly started spreading out into other states. State after state, farmers started adopting this technique, which was form small groups, attack the house of a zamindar in the night, behead the zamindar. Especially those zamindars who were very exploitative, especially those zamindars who were notorious for raping poor women. This just spread like wildfire. And interestingly, even a few urban intellectual youth who were unemployed at that point of time, and some even who were employed, found this idea to be very good and great. Because it was immediate result. Because two zamindars, if you behead in this fashion, almost every zamindar started having fear. And they would stop all atrocities immediately after that. So it was immediate result. Not that you go to a police station, you file a case, it will go to the judiciary, you prove it, and then the verdict will come. It was immediate result on spot. And this found fancy with the urban youth, the intellectual youth, both men and women. They all joined together into this movement. They all came out of their own voluntary will into this movement. And Naxal suddenly had this whole romance emotion associated with it. To call that, yes, I am a Naxal in the 70s or 80s was considered to be something great. Clearly misplaced priorities of the youth. Nothing else to say. Like I told you, if youth don't have anything to engage themselves in, productive to engage themselves with, this will be the end result. So basically, youth of that generation found their identity by what? By claiming allegiance to Naxal movement. Clear with this? More on this now. The Naxalite movement engages in guerrilla warfare against the Indian security forces as propounded by Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong, as said in some circles. So what was this ideology that was propagated by Mao Zedong, which was followed by the Naxals at that point of time? Because when the peasants actually attacked the police in Naxalbari village, they did not know about Mao Zedong. Let us be very honest here. They only knew that there is an oppressive feudal system there led by the zamindars, where the state was also supporting the zamindars. So it is important to fight against them. This was spontaneous. But later on, when Naxal movement as such started spreading its wings into the other states, it got an ideological color to it. Because like I told you, the intellectuals, the urban educated intellectuals, they too started joining into the movement, and they gave it a thought process to it, an ideology to it, a philosophy to it. And suddenly, Naxalbari was not a spontaneous emotional outburst of the peasants. Naxalbari became Naxalism or Naxal movement, which slowly started spreading its wings all over the state, most of the states in the country, where the ideology was what? To bring in a change through violent means by taking in arms. And what or how was it related with Mao Zedong's philosophy? Here you go. Yu Chi Chan, Guerrilla Warfare 1937. Mao delineated factors crucial for victory: terrain, communication, popular support, quality of cadres, surprise attack, technical aid. Surprise attacks are still conducted by the Naxals, or rather the Maoists. So what are the factors crucial for victory? Terrain, the geography. Obviously terrain, if you talk about, most of the terrain is what? Forested, which only the tribal people or the peasants who are there in within the vicinity are aware of. Communication, they have their own means of communication, which unfortunately cannot be decrypted or understood by most of the security forces. Because security forces, when we talk about CRPF or talk about an IPS officer or an IAS officer like yourself, you are in that region. You could be what? As long as, let us say, you are from Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand region, then it is okay. Or you are from, let us say, the Tri-Junction region between Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, you are from that region and you became an IAS officer, fine, you will be able to handle the tribal issues there. But more often than not, a city-bred intellectual who cracked the service, what does he or she know about tribal practice or tribal language there? You are in a different state, you would have learned the language, the official language of the state. But what about the tribal language? Nobody is there to teach you. So it is very difficult for you to understand their language and how they are communicating. They could be talking right in front of you, where they are deciding whether to kill you with a sword or whether to kill you with a gun. You never know. Getting the picture? So this is how dangerous it can be. Then popular support. Tribal people support, they enjoy. So as long as they enjoy the tribal support, it is very difficult to nab them, very difficult to know about their whereabouts. Quality of cadres, even they are given training. That is, if you actually read the survival stories of the CRPF officers who survived ambush attacks, most of them has to say only one thing: from where they came and how they ran back, dispersed back into the forest, nobody had a clue. Because suddenly they just came out of the forest, encircled the entire company of CRPF and started firing at them indiscriminately. And as soon as They finished firing, they just dispersed back into the forest. So training is given to them to, what is it, to withstand an attack from the side of the security forces. Training is given to them to survive for days and days in forest without food or water. And that is why they are so successful in their surprise attacks. Technical aid, unfortunately, where do they get from? From our neighboring countries or by other crime syndicates. Clear, people? This is the thing. Moving on. So, what does Mao Zedong's ideology teach us further? It teaches to capture state power through a combination of an armed insurgency, mass mobilization, and strategic alliances. Mao calls this process the protracted people's war. Armed insurgency, that means you have to use weapons. Mass mobilization, gathering as many people as possible, and forming strategic alliances which will further the cause. And what is the cause here? To remove the government. That is the cause. Clear, people? Moving on. The Maoist ideology glorifies violence. As you can clearly see, when Naxalism started, like I told you, it started off with what? Beheadings. Beheadings of the zamindars. And later, it got this ideological context and it found that both are in sync with each other. So, it glorifies violence and therefore, bearing of arms is non-negotiable. Carrying arms, if you ask a Naxalite to actually lay down their arms, they won't lay it down. That is why later onwards, West Bengal governments as well as other state governments started giving money in return for surrendering of arms. So if you surrender an AK-47 rifle, an automatic rifle or an assault rifle, you get around 10 lakhs. You surrender a handgun, you get around 5 lakhs. Like that, money was actually announced in return for surrendering the arms. Getting the idea here? So this is how rehabilitation was being made possible. Maoism fundamentally considers the industrial-rural divide as a major division exploited by capitalism. So that is where it all starts from. The rural divide or the regional industrial-rural divide, why does it exist? It is because of capitalism. And who is standing close with capitalism? The government. So how to defeat the government? By bearing arms, by mass mobilization. And all of this what leads to successful Naxal attacks. Got the idea here? Getting the picture? How it all started from one village, suddenly got an intellectual flavoring to it based on Mao Zedong's ideology, and how the ideology propounded by Mao Zedong is closely related with the movement that started in the Naxalbari village of West Bengal, and today how it led to the Red Corridor. Clear so much? Moving on. Now, the causes for the spread of left-wing extremism. We know from Naxalbari it started. Later on, it got an ideological color. Till there, it is fine. But why did it spread? Naxalbari peasants were unhappy. Fine. But what about the other states? Were they also unhappy? And this is where we are going to revisit the factors that actually led to Naxalism, starting with obviously the land-related factors. Evasion of land ceiling laws done by most of the state governments. Most of the state governments in the country. To an extent, it was only successful in Kerala and West Bengal. In the states of Kerala and West Bengal. Other than that, in most of the states, it was a failure. Leading to what? Leading to the divide between have and have not. Existence of special land tenure. Special land tenure actually allowed for what? Allowed you to enjoy exemptions under the land ceiling laws. That is basically land ceiling laws were passed. But always the state government saw to it that there were plenty of loopholes in the law so that you can bypass it. Or even if a land ceiling act was passed, and if let us say I am a tribal, okay, I am a member of the tribal group, I filed a case against the zamindar that see this person is holding more land, that land actually belongs to my forefather. The case used to get dragged for years together. Who will go to the court and keep fighting? Then, encroachment and occupation of government and community land, even the water bodies, by powerful sections of the society. So, government land, when it is taken over, nobody is there to ask because you bribe the necessary people, it gets taken care of. Corruption helps in it. But when community land of the tribal people are taken away, then what will it lead to? It creates an anger against the government. And when water bodies are also taken, what happens? You're questioning the culture of tribal people there. Like I told you, water bodies are also worshipped by tribal people. Now you oppress them in the name of agriculture, you oppress them in the name of wages. That is a different thing. But you take away their culture also out of them, it creates a whole new level of delineation. Clear? Lack of title to public land cultivated by the landless poor. So title deeds are there. Title deeds means what? Sometimes the government will say, okay, this much land in this particular area, this which is under the government, we are going to give it to the tribal people. So this land will be given to the tribal people. This is what we say, or this is what the government does. Titles are given, but the title which is given to the tribal people itself, the whole exercise is what marred by corruption. So some of them get the title land at least on paper, only on paper, but they don't actually receive it. Even if they receive it by hook or crook, they are fooled, they are told lies, and the title deed is taken away from them and it is given away to some rich industrialist or lobbyist. Getting the idea? Then, poor implementation of laws prohibiting transfer of tribal land to non-tribals in the 5th schedule areas. So actually, if a tribal land is being diverted for non-tribal, and if a forested land is going to be diverted for non-forest purposes, there are a certain set of procedures that have been clearly mentioned in the constitution that has to be followed. Case in point being consultation with Gram Sabhas. But most of these are not adhered to. As a result of which, what it led to? Led to the spread of Naxalism further. Because more and more mobilization was one of the core ideologies of Mao Zedong. So wherever oppression was there, go and sell this idea of Naxalism, immediately people used to come and join for it. Non-regularization of traditional land rights. So like I told you, traditionally if in an area tribal people are living, what should be the government doing? Assign that land to them. But instead, if the government officials go and ask for proof, documentation, prove that this is your land, how will the tribal people be able to prove it? And in the name of lack of documentation, if they are evicted from that land, what will be the end result? Naxalism is already in fashion. Tribal people will definitely find it attractive. They will go and join it. Simple. And this just kept on. And this way, what is happening here? It is spreading now. Getting the picture? It got the intellectual flavor. And then situation is very conducive for it to be accepted as an ideology or as a preferred means of venting out the frustration against the government. But it doesn't end here. It continues further. There are other reasons now. Eviction from lands traditionally used by tribals. Now you have evicted them. Automatically, they are going to feel angry towards the government. Displacement caused by irrigation and power projects without adequate arrangements for rehabilitation. Example, the Bakra Nangal Dam. So ultimately, see, if you travel in Delhi metro, you will find that hardly anybody is spitting inside the train. Hardly anybody is spoiling the facilities inside the metro train. Why? Because be it the rich or be it the poor, everybody is able to see this is for me. This train facility is for me. The same thing applies for all the other metro trains in the country. Not just Delhi metro. All other metro trains also, it is more or less the same thing. Quality is the same. How is it that the quality has been maintained so far by all the people of all different states wherever you find a metro? Because people know this is for me. And it is an A-class facility where no difference is made between the rich or the poor. Sometimes the man in a triple-breasted suit, you can see him standing. And somebody without sandals, after his daily wage job, would have come there and will be sitting there in the seat. He need not stand up for the guy who is in the suit. Pure equality and equity existing right there under one single roof. Tell me, you are constructing a dam, being part of the government. As a tribal, I am feeling, okay, why are you constructing the dam? I'll take the water from the river. For whom is the dam? Then you learn it later that the dam is for people who are living in the city. Water is for the people who are doing farming. The water is also for producing electricity, which you don't require at all, or which I don't require at all, being a tribal. Then for whom it is? So there I get the feeling what I have been exploited. This leads to what? Automatically people will go and join what? Naxalism. Getting the idea? Then large scale land acquisition for public purposes without appropriate compensation or rehabilitation. What we saw earlier. That is, there should be forest. There should be land. There should be water. Whatever rehabilitation you do of tribals, all these three should be there. But it is missing. If this is missing, at least you should compensate them enough. But for people who are mostly indulged in a barter economy type of a system, where they don't indulge in cash transactions, what does the government also do generally? Does the government compensate them adequately? That is both materialistically or otherwise? No. Again leading to what? Spread of Naxalism or the ideology of Naxalism. Then coming to what? Livelihood related causes. Lack of food security. The corruption in public distribution system, which is often non-functional. PDS being non-functional. See, Naxalism thrives on what idea? Naxalism thrives on the idea that the state is useless. The state is incapable. Whatever symbols of state you see, kill them, destroy them. This is what Naxalism propagates. Getting the idea? That is where D. Vijay Kumar IPS, when he became the Director General of CRPF, one instruction what he gave to his cadres, the lower ranking officers to him, he told one thing: if Naxals are coming and attacking the PDS shops, let them attack. Ultimately, what are they doing? They are just taking the rice away. They are taking the wheat away. Whatever is given there, whatever food is there, they are attacking it away. They are taking the sugar away. Let them take. Because on these sacks, what is there? Food Corporation of India. The seal, the symbol is there. Let them get to know that there is a government called India. There is a government of India there. There is a Food Corporation of India there. Let them get to know about it at least. Let the tribal people see the symbol and let them familiarize with it. That is the foundation. That is where you actually defeat the idea of Naxalism by telling them that no, you cannot form the government. You cannot be the government. There is a democratically elected government. Getting the picture here? Next, disruption of traditional occupation and lack of alternative work opportunities. Obviously, you take them out of the forest and you show them some piece of land. Tell them to start doing settled cultivation here, where the tribal people are not at all aware of it. Then how are you going to give them an alternative livelihood there? How will they survive there? British tried doing it with the tribals and they failed miserably. They found out that there are certain tribals who can only practice shifting cultivation. Other than that, they don't know anything else. And because they don't know anything else, and if you tell them to do only settled cultivation, they get angry at you. British understood this. So they gave exemptions to certain tribal groups who were practicing shifting cultivation. Our government, why are we not able to understand it? When I say our government, don't think that it is a present government. I'm talking about all the governments from the time this issue started. Deprivation of traditional rights in common property resources. Common property resources, when I say, it means forest, it means the land, the water, etc. Everything. So their rights are being denied and they are being told, don't go there, don't go here. This is a tiger zone, that is an elephant zone. This is protected here. This is an elephant corridor. Don't march into that region. Whereas if you actually see, ask any tribal people, How many tribal people have been attacked or killed by a tiger or by a leopard or by an elephant? How many such news do we get to read in the paper? More often than not, we'll get to hear tiger came into a habitat, a rural habitat where people were living or having settled agriculture system. That news we would have heard. We would have even heard of elephant coming and attacking settled cultivators. That also we would have heard, even in the case of leopards also. Tribal people, how many such news have we heard? It is actually because they live in perfect harmony. Because even a tribal person knows not to interfere with the domain or the territory of an elephant or that of a tiger. Even if they go in, even if accidentally they walks into the territory also, they will come out of there. They will not tamper with the tiger's lifestyle or tiger's habitat. It is some sort of a mutual respect that they have for each other. Getting the picture here. But then what ends up happening here, in the name of protecting these animals, tribal people are evicted from these areas. Their livelihood is affected. As a result of which, what happens? Spread of Naxalism. Getting the idea? So all that is needed is tribal people should feel what? They are oppressed. And then Naxalism comes as this low-hanging fruit to which they immediately grab in. Why? Mass mobilization. Because now they know that it is not just them. There are many people like them who are oppressed and who have joined Naxalism and have earned their rights or have grabbed their rights. So we will also grab. I will also grab my rights. What ends up happening? Trouble for the government officials, trouble for the IAS officers, trouble for the IPS officers. Getting the idea? Why? Because you are the face of the government. Getting the picture here? You are the ultimate face of the government. So you will face the brunt of it. Clear? Moving on. Governance related factors. Again, corruption and poor provision or non-provision of essential public services, including primary healthcare and education. So like I told you, if visible aspects of governance are missing, automatically people will start questioning, like, then why do we need a government? And when governance deficit is clearly there, automatically you are creating what? A nice fertile ground for alternate government. And in this particular case, the alternate government is what? Naxalism. Getting the idea? Because there is no system there. Tri-junction areas and all we saw, it is largely forested. There is no infrastructure, no communication, nothing, no modern means of any connectivity, nothing is available. But for the tribals, they know the terrain, etc. So finally, they will decide, okay, who should be the chief? This person will be the tribal chief. What will be the rule? This will be the rule. What if any non-tribal comes here? We will kill him. They decide on these things. Getting the idea? So that is the reason why governance has to be visible first in every part of the country to actually put a stop to the spread of Naxalism. Getting the idea? Moving on. So let us see what are the other governance related factors that led to the spread of extremism. Incompetent, ill-trained, poorly motivated public personnel, mostly absent from their place of posting. Some officers, when they get their posting in rural areas, remote areas, tribal areas, they take it up. They take it up as a challenge because, see, ultimately, life is all about challenges. One way or the other, it will come to you. So either you pick up the challenges that comes to you, or challenge will pick you up. That is what it is. That is the general thing about life. But here, let us try to understand. Somebody who gets a posting in the remote area, if it is an IPS officer and you suddenly decide, oh, I don't want to go there. Oh, IAS officer, I don't want to go there. Right? Give a medical leave, give a long leave, or take an extraordinary leave. These are some of the options available. You use it. But the governance, what was meant to be executed through your post, that remains vacant. Because you have gone on leave, technically that post cannot be filled till then, till you come back or resume your duty, or till you get a transfer. Nobody else can come and sit in that post either. What is the end result? Complete governance deficit. Worst case scenario, I will tell you. What if it is a doctor? One primary health center in a rural remote area. That doctor has decided not to go there because it's a city bred doctor. From cities after cities, only all the medical degrees were taken. Doesn't want to go to a rural posting. How many lives will be lost in this process because of lack of medical treatment? And like I tell you, when you end up losing your wife, when you end up losing your sister, mother, or when you end up losing your husband, brother, son, your child, daughter, anybody, any loved one, when you lose to a disease which was curable, to a disease which could have saved, you could have saved the life of the person on prompt medical treatment, all hell will break loose. And doctor again is a representative of what? The government. So all those representatives of the government has a moral responsibility to take up their posting and deliver good governance in these sensitive regions. But they don't do it. Getting the picture? This further creates what? Spread of Naxalism again. Clear? In addition to this, misuse of powers by the police and violation of the norms of law. Because when they finally get hold of these tribals also, it is, see, you arrest a Naxal, you take them to the court, you produce them in front of a magistrate, that is the legal procedure. Naxals were violating the law, Naxals were harming the cops or were doing barbaric acts should not be a ground for the cops to end up committing barbaric acts. They should try to see to it that justice is met out in the rightful manner. But more often than not, what ends up happening is cops tend to go the illegal way by taking matters into their own hand, even doing illegal killings in the name of encounter. Let me tell you, encounter itself has been decried by the Supreme Court as foul. There is no such word as encounter. You can fire your weapon only on ground of self-defense. Clear? Perversion of electoral politics and unsatisfactory working of local government institutions. Because like I told you, the electoral politics or the local government institutions which are part of the democratic electoral process or election process, they are actually based on what? They are based on pressure groups, who will vote for whom, all that. Whereas tribals, that is not how they function. For them, if they actually make somebody the chief is supposed to be taking care of all their problems. They look up to the chief. But the electoral politics that is there in our country, till the point we go and cast the vote, their candidates require our help and support. But once we cast our votes and the election is over, how many of these candidates will come back to their constituency and literally listen to the problems of the people? So once again, what happens? Distance increases. CRPF recruiting tribals. So like I told you, CRPF, when they initially started out to deal with this Naxal problem, the fundamental issue was the CRPF did not know the terrain. So they started recruiting tribals who knew the terrain to fight against the Naxals. And this created further problems because it created divisions within the tribes. As a result of which it created further anger, further resentment towards the state, because more often than not, the tribals who were recruited like this by the CRPF, they were engaged in gross human right violations. Clear, people? This was the scenario there. Clear with this? Shall we move on then? So with that, we come to an end of causes for the spread of left-wing extremism. So we saw the causes, which was again, once again, an amalgamation of the general points what I told you in the beginning. Correct? And then we have added a few more points. But now we will literally look into how Naxalism evolved in stages. There are 3 stages to the evolution of Naxalism. How that evolved, we will look into that in detail now. Now let us look into the factors or the different stages through which Naxalism spread throughout India. The first stage is considered to be the Naxalite movement began in May 1967 in 3 police station areas, Naxalbari, Koribari and Fansi Deva, of Darjeeling district in West Bengal. In November 1967, left-wing extremists from the whole country founded the All India Coordination Committee in Kolkata. So clearly you must understand here, this is not something that happened randomly. Years of frustration, pent up anger, all of this was being vented out in 1967, because by then 20 years have passed, 20 long years of oppression. Getting the picture here? So you must understand here that this is a continuous failure from the side of the state in implementing the Land Ceiling Act, in the Zamindari Abolition Act, in giving the tenancy reforms, etc. All of this over the years, finally people just let out their frustration, and that was the first stage of what? Spread of Naxalism. In the second stage of the spread of Naxalism, what do we see? The movement arose again in a more violent form after the emergency in the 1970s. So 1975 to 77, when emergency was declared, the police had maximum powers here. India literally became a police state where any sort of dissent, any sort of criticism, any sort of complaint, anything remotely, even an editorial against the government was not tolerated. So the only thing that was focused was that everybody should just do their work. So this was actually a time period where the police could unleash terror literally into the hearts of the Naxals. At least that is what the cops thought they would do. But what it actually led to was a further alienation, further recruitment, further voluntarily joining the Naxal movement. One controversial initiative that was taken by the government of that time during the emergency period was compulsory sterilization of the men. As a result of which, most of the men ran away and hid in forests or in the hills, including the tribal people, fearing vasectomy surgeries. And this further led to what? Anger. Those of them who couldn't escape as such, who were subjected to compulsory sterilization, they started developing antagonist feelings towards the government. And that finally led to what? Even more recruitment or even more spread of Naxalism. Their base grew from West Bengal to Bihar to Odisha and also to Andhra Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Because police at this point of time, even to break the back of Naxal movement, what did they resort to? Extreme forms of violence, murder and rape. Tribal women were not at all spared. Even those families who were considered or even remotely suspected of being supportive of the Naxalite cause were brutally dealt with by the state's police force. So this further, with every act of oppression or aggression being committed by the government by flouting the laws, when people are arrested and they are given a chance to fight their case in judiciary, that is a different case. But here, maximum oppression was already in existence because of the existing conditions of emergency. And into that, further oppression that was put forward by the police further led to what? Further alienation or more recruitment into Naxalism. Then, into the second stage again, we have what? CPI, Marxist-Leninist, was converted into People's War Group in 1980. Which had its base in Andhra Pradesh and struck heavy casualties among the police personnel. So now look at it. Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist. That means, you have to bring in the power of the people or power of workers or the power of the proletariat has to be brought in by going for a bloody revolution against the government. This is the fundamental idea of Marxist-Leninist communist ideology. That is, change can be brought only through a violent and a bloody revolution. Bloody revolution, when I say, it is not in a derogatory term. Bloody revolution means only by shedding blood. Only through bloodshed you can bring in a revolution. That means we are talking about armed struggle again. And that, look at the way they changed the name, People's War Group. By calling it People's War Group, you are making war justified, violence justified, killings justified, and killings, violence against what? Police personnel. Those police personnel who have committed atrocities should be tried according to the law, not that people take the law into their hands. Number one. And when you are using excessive violence, what about those cops who were actually abiding by the law? Because violence doesn't differentiate between the wrongdoers and the right doers. There are bound to be collateral damage. And obviously, it was an open war front by then. Kerala, Wayanad area, to guard exploitation of the feudal lords and the police system towards tribal population. So in Kerala, let me tell you how things evolved, considered even back then also, as it is now, to be one of the most literate state. Literate state to the core were, yes, tribal populations were there, working peasants populations were there, especially towards the Wayanad side, the northern side, where the peasants used to work in coffee plantations. But then, in the case of the Naxalite movement in Kerala, it was actually spread over most of the intellectuals, people who were very well read, well educated, who had degrees after degrees, post graduation degrees, etc. At that point of time, they were the core front of Naxalite movement. And what was the reason again? Because one common element, be it from West Bengal's Naxalbari village to all the way down to Kerala, one common element was the exploitation of the tribals done by the zamindars. There was no change in this character there. That is physical oppression, mental oppression, humiliation, rape of their women. This continued almost like a continuous violation state after state. So here in Kerala, when the peasants also started protesting against it, it again took a very violent form in the sense that the Naxals who formed here followed the same principles which were adopted in Naxalbari village, which was what? Beheading of the zamindars. In the dead of the night, they used to go to the houses of the zamindars. They would loot their food stock, distribute it to the poor tribals and to the poor peasants. And if they were found to have been, exploitative in terms of, let us say, giving out money, because most of these zamindars also doubled up as what? Money lenders. So if they were money lenders, and if the poor peasant would have pledged his title of his land and taken money, those title deeds were returned back to the poor tribals. But if the zamindar was notorious for harming women, then the only solution that the Naxals adopted was beheading. To the point where beheading was done and the head was actually placed on top of the gate. This used to happen in the state of Kerala. Finally, police force as well as the state government at that point of time decided to take this matter very seriously, because lawlessness cannot be entertained. No matter how justified the cause is, the end what you are doing, how are you trying to achieve your participatory democracy, or you're trying to achieve upliftment of the poor by actually taking law into your own hand through barbaric act of murdering somebody, and symbolification of what? The barbaric act or the gruesome act, which was sending in fear. So this fear actually started spreading slowly, and to arrest it all, the police combined with the state government decided to come down very heavily on the Naxalite movement. It led to a lot of police brutalities, lot of gross human rights violations, but then to an extent, Naxalite movement spread was arrested in most of the states through police initiatives. But did that actually put an end to it? Well, let us see it. So, the third stage what we talk about here, Naxal violence was raised after the formation of CPI Maoist, which aimed to overthrow the semi-colonial, semi-feudal Indian state through People's War. So Indian state was being seen as pro-capitalist, pro-zamindar, pro-landed class. It was never seen as somebody for the people, of the people, or by the people, at least by the Naxal cadres under CPI Maoist. So they followed this Maoist ideology openly now, and they openly declared their allegiance, and they openly declared that they are what? Against the Indian state, and they plan to overthrow it. Again, obviously, what is the fundamental feature of this? armed violence. So the representatives of the state in the sense the IAS officers, the IPS officers were all considered to be what? The villains here. And they were attacked. We know a few years ago, an IAS officer also was actually kidnapped by the Maoists. But later on, he was released. But in the process, what happened was that his gunman had to lose his life. And what was the end result? He was released, but what about the gunman's family? Getting the idea here. So these type of attacks continue to take place. CPI Maoist and its formations are included in the schedule of terrorist organizations under the UAPA Act of 1967. Clear? So under that, it is designated as a terrorist organization driven by ideology. What type of ideology? Political ideology influenced by Maoism. That is why it is declared as a political ideology based terrorism, because they directly see government of India as a threat. That is the reason. They perceive government of India as a threat. And directly they are claiming, openly they are claiming that they will overthrow the state through violent means. So obviously we cannot also sit there simply with our hands folded. So if somebody is going to threaten the government of India, we will have to meet it out equally on the same footing. Violence means we will have to counter it with violence. Dialogue means we will have to counter it with dialogue on the suitable basis. When I say suitable basis, it should be like conducive. Not that when bullets are being fired at us or at our army officers or at our CRPF Jawan, we decide, okay, let us not fire bullets, let us go and talk with them. That is not possible. Dialogue is only possible when they are ready to lay down their arms. But we know it. Maoist ideology itself is what? Armed struggle. So laying down arms is not at all there in their equation. That is why they have been designated as what? Terrorist organization. Clear with that? Moving on. So Naxalites have been a strain on the country's security forces and a barrier to development in the vast mineral-rich region in eastern India known as the Red Corridor. So finally, with all the initiatives and everything, even whatever we try to do, try to suppress it through excessive brutality, try to suppress it through excessive use of police force or the forces of the Central Reserve Police, etc. We tried everything possible, capturing their major leaders, subjecting them to third-degree police torture, getting information out of them, sometimes even going for extrajudicial killings. All of that we tried, but still Naxalism ended up spreading everywhere. Because the root cause, inequality, lack of development, historic neglect, exploitation, these just remained as it is. So until and unless the fundamental issues not being addressed, just by firing bullet for bullet or just by countering violence with violence was only going to give short-term relief. And eventually, Naxalism started spreading throughout India, and eventually it gained the notoriety or fame in the name of Red Corridor. One look at the map of India's Maoist conflict region will tell us one thing, that this region right here is what? Highly infested with Maoism or Naxalism. And this again, like I told you, when we were discussing the core issues that are involved behind Naxalism, geographic reason, when I told you, I did mention to you what? Very quickly, I did mention to you that these are forested areas. These are rich in non-metallic minerals. And these are also rich in metallic minerals. Clear? So all these were there. Clear, people? And once again, we can see that this is also the region even now is what? Rather infamous for Maoism. Clear? Now, let us take this region itself. The region what I have highlighted now, let us look into that region into a little more in detail. So what do we see? The Red Corridor itself, if you see, or the major areas where Maoism is still in effect, they are Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, parts of Andhra Pradesh. Of the 88 left-wing extremism affected areas in the country, these have borne the brunt of Naxal violence the most. 88. These are the worst affected areas. And needless to say, getting a posting here as an IPS officer or as an IAS officer has its own set of risks. But yes, you will be protected to the core. You will be protected to the core. Getting the idea? Because an IPS officer or IAS officer, when you're posted in such sensitive areas, your protection level is also of an equally high level. So that is the idea here. So these are the few areas. So again, if you see Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, you can see that there are beautiful tri-junctions here. Tri-junctions here, which actually makes it impossible for what? Implementation of any governance related measures here. Getting the picture? Step by step, we are trying to solve the problem here by slowly bringing in developmental initiatives. All right, moving on.